Good evening, and welcome to tonight's Finksburg Planning and Citizens Council Carroll County Board of Education Candidates Forum from the studio at the Community Media Center. My name is Teresa Bethune, Vice Chair of the Community Media Center Board of Directors. This forum is being streamed live on the CMC's website at carrollmediacenter.org, as well as on Facebook and YouTube, and it is being broadcast on cable channel HD 1086. So we ask everyone to please silence their cell phones and hold all applause until the end. The forum will be available for on-demand viewing online and will repeat regularly on our cable channels until the election. The CMC is airing this programming as a public service to the community. We encourage citizens to learn more about the candidates and to take an active part in the electoral process. At this time, I will turn the program over to our moderator for the evening, Skip Boyles, President of the Finksburg Planning and Citizens Council, to introduce the candidates, explain the rules, and open tonight's forum. Skip?
Thank you, Teresa. Welcome to all in attendance here at the Carroll Communications Media Center, and also to those individuals viewing from home for this evening's Finksburg Planning and Citizens Council Board of Education Candidate Forum. The candidates attending our forum program this evening are Patricia Endorse, Amanda Juskowski, James Miller, Tom Scanlon, Steve Whistler. Tara Battaglia was unable to attend tonight. She is the sixth candidate that is running for office. The six candidates are seeking three seats on the Board of Education. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to reply to 6 questions provided previously to them in advance, and we'll conclude that portion of the program at about 8 p.m. The second half of the program will consist of questions randomly selected from a large number of questions sent to us ahead of time via email and also collected tonight from audience members attending the program live. Assisting tonight is Heather Owens from the Finksburg Library. Heather will help select the random questions. She will read the random questions for the second portion of the program this evening. We plan to end the program at around 9 o'clock this evening. So the first section are prepared questions that the candidates have all had in advance. The second portion will be random questions selected out of audience submittals. Each candidate will then have 1 minute for a closing statement at the end of the program, and again, we'll try to conclude by 9 o'clock. We'll monitor timing for each of the questions so that the response time for the candidates will be balanced and the time will be appropriate for each of the questions, and everyone will get a fair share of time. We'll now begin with our first prepared question. We'll start with Patricia Endorse first. We'll rotate through on the various questions. Patricia, tell us about yourself, including why you believe you are qualified to serve as a Board of Education member.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dr. Patricia Dorsey. A little about myself. I completed a 39-year career with Carroll County Public Schools. I began my career as an elementary school teacher at William Winchester Elementary, teaching grades 3 and 2 for 4 years, and then transferring to Open Westminster Elementary School as the team leader for grade 3. After completing 10 years in the classroom, I became a reading resource teacher for Title I schools. And at this juncture, I provided professional development for our Title I staff along with one other team member. Later, I was assigned as the assistant principal at Eldersburg Elementary School and then principal at Tawnytown, William Winchester, and Friendship Valley Elementary Schools. I earned a Bachelor of Science degree at Morgan College, a master's degree at Western Maryland College, and a Doctor of Education degree at University of Maryland College Park. These work and educational experiences prepare me to serve on the Board of Education. Additionally, I'm completing my first term on the board, so serving has certainly enhanced my understanding of the position, and it's also given me the opportunity to serve with other board members at the state level.
Thank you. Amanda?
Hello, I'm Dr. Amanda Jiskowski. I'm a parent of 3, an educator and researcher, and a licensed and practicing healthcare professional. But you've heard a lot about my experience in the past, so I wanted to take a little moment to acknowledge Ms. Battaglia spoke so nicely earlier this week about her love for Carroll County and her pride in growing up here and being a member of this community. And since you asked me about myself, I wanted to state that I've never suggested that I'm ashamed of our county, and in fact, it's just the opposite. In the widely shared comment that I made in response to a new resident's question about diversity, I stated that it really bothers me when other people have a negative perception, and I want to work to change that as a board member. I enthusiastically chose this community to raise my 3 young children, and that is true of so many of my neighbors here in South Carroll, and in all of Carroll County. What I care about is that everyone recognizes what a fantastic county we have, because this will help us move up in state rankings, be treated as equals with our neighboring counties by our state and federal leaders, and those people are also our funders. Certainly there are things I see that we could be doing better, but that's really why I'm running for school board. If some of my opponents don't want to see any changes made, in my opinion, that is much more problematic. In my mind, working together can bring a more welcoming, community-minded school system that represents the needs and interests of every child and family, and I have the skills and desire to serve.
Thank you. James?
Thank you. James Miller. First, I want to start off, I'm a parent of 3 beautiful daughters attending Carroll County Public Schools. I have a middle schooler and 2 elementary school-aged daughters. I grew up in Carroll County, was raised here, started when I was in middle school, graduated from Liberty High School in 2001, and have continued to serve our community since. I'm the president of North Carroll Girls Lacrosse, vice president of North Carroll Girls Rec Council, and I've spent a lot of time mentoring and educating our children in the community throughout my years in Carroll County. I have an undergraduate in economics from UMBC. I have a MBA in finance from Loyola, and I've spent my entire career in finance in the healthcare sector since graduating college. When I look ahead to challenges facing Carroll County Public Schools, I think the biggest thing that we have ahead of us is financial. We have a blueprint coming down from the state that's going to require funding, and we all know, and if those who don't know, we're going to be probably going to be a little short when it comes to state funding. So we're going to have to work with our commissioners in order to get that funding in order to implement Blueprint. I think we have opportunity in capital improvements. We've talked about school closures. We've talked about redistricting. We have a lot of aging schools, and we're going to need a background. My background in finance is going to help with those capital projects. As we look ahead, I'm proud of Carroll County, as I've always said. I'm proud of our teachers. It's why I decided to stay here and raise my kids here, and I look forward to serving the Carroll County community.
Thank you. Tom?
I have what I feel is the most important qualification to serve. I'm a proud 33-year career teacher here in Carroll County. I care deeply about the success of our students and the future of our schools. I've worked with all academic levels, from those with severe learning disabilities to the gifted and talented, the level 4 students. So I have insight into the academic needs of all our students. I worked on several curriculum writing teams, so I understand the process of creating a rigorous curriculum and how to scaffold instruction for each student. I've mentored several student teachers, so providing adequate resources to our new educators is very important to me. I had 4 sons come through Carroll County schools. As a parent, I was involved in their education. I volunteered when I could. I came to all the school activities I could. Josh and James were drama kids, and we attended every performance of every play. Thomas was on a championship state cross-country team, and we were at all the cross-country meets. So I know firsthand how essential parental involvement is for student success. And as a reading specialist and English teacher, I know how important basic fundamental academics are for our kids. And I have trust. I have trust in the educators who are passionate about teaching their content and only their content. I have trust in our building level administrators who work so hard, and in our central office staff. And finally, when teachers and parents work together, we can achieve the core goal of our schools, and that's the education of our young people to become productive adults.
Steve?
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for hosting this forum this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to meet voters and to communicate my message. Many people that I've knocked on doors, almost 10,000 of them, truly don't understand what the Board of Education is or does. And I think it's really important to highlight that. The Board of Education manages nearly half of the county budget. They're charged with overseeing the superintendent and the county's largest employer. They're responsible for negotiation of employer group contracts, determining the strategic direction of our schools, and making sure we adhere to federal and state rules and laws. They also interact with politicians and business leaders to get the resources we need for our children. The Board of Education is not responsible for teaching classes, writing curriculum, and running the day-to-day operations. With my background, I'm a parent, I'm a retired naval officer, I am a former business executive, and I have managed large employer groups. I've managed budgets in excess of $2 billion, served on Maryland's largest credit union board of directors, so I know what it means to supervise the leaders of a large organization and making sure they're doing their job. I've taught in our schools also for nearly 9 years, so I know the struggles facing our students, our staff, and I have an education, a Master's of Science degree in Management from Troy State, a Bachelor of Arts degree in Sociology from Excelsior College, an AA from Catonsville Community College, and I think I have the skill sets that we need to make sure that our school system succeeds and goes in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That concludes question number 1. We'll go to question number 2 now, and we'll begin with Amanda. What is your position on virtual teaching, and how would you measure teaching and learning effectiveness?
So I think the first thing is that we need to understand that there's a difference between emergency remote instruction and virtual learning. I've personally taught hybrid or fully online courses for more than 5 years, but I participated in a great deal of additional training in course design and teaching strategies that are specific to virtual learning to prepare for that. I think during COVID, educators and administrators did absolutely everything they could to meet the needs of students under incredibly challenging circumstances. Not only did emergency remote instruction occur during times of great uncertainty and constantly evolving information, but the learning curve for technology use and new ways of teaching and assessing students was steep for both the teachers and the students. This is why we celebrated our teachers at the height of the school closures, but then something shifted and teachers became pitted against parents rather than working in partnership. The thing is, I believe any position that a parent took or takes now or did at that time was based on genuinely held beliefs regarding what was best for their child and their family, and I respect that. I'm grateful that more people were exposed to the scientific process and have a better understanding that recommendations from public health officials are based on current information and what's best on the population level. So it's important to remember that we should be keeping kids in school to the extent possible as long as it's safe, and that we have a lot to learn from virtual learning, what works and what doesn't, and for whom, and that we can continue to increase access through virtual learning as well.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. I don't think it'd be a surprise to anybody if I said, you know, I'm not in favor of virtual learning. Those who have known me know I've spoke out against it at board meetings, commissioner meetings. And I think the biggest reason why, and I've talked about this very early on in the pandemic, you know, my biggest concern was the least advantaged and the least privileged. When you send everybody home and you say you need access to internet, you need access to a laptop, you need access to somebody being home with you for your younger child to supervise, to ensure that you're able to learn and able to sign on and be online. That's asking a lot. I think what we've forgotten that process is not, you know, a lot of households are 2 working parent households. And yes, during COVID, we were able to work from home and make it work. But I don't see, honestly, I don't see a situation where I could see us going back to virtual. We've learned from the past that our elementary school students especially struggle tremendously trying to learn online. I have a first grader now. She was a kindergartner last year, obviously, and in pre-K when COVID started. She actually entered school with an IEP for speech, and the biggest reason why was she wasn't able to have face-to-face contact, you know, outside of our home for so long that her speech was delayed. So I think everybody knows I'm very much against virtual learning. I believe we have to keep our kids in the classroom. Now, I will say, since I have 10 seconds, at the high school level, if we can make it work for a kid to get a class that's not offered at their high school, great, it prepares them for college. But when we're talking about virtual learning, anything below that, I'm not in favor of it.
Tom?
Obviously, a virtual environment is not ideal for most students or teachers for that matter. Face-to-face personal instruction, interaction is what we do as educators. That's not to say there isn't a place for virtual instruction. Providing virtual classes in the world languages is the perfect example of how beneficial it can be. There is a disparity around the county as to which world languages are offered in which school. FSK only offers Spanish, for example. Having a virtual Latin or German class available, which are offered at Westminster High, would allow students in every high school the opportunity to take one of those languages. French is another language not available in every school. Having asynchronous virtual instruction when we've used up all our inclement weather days certainly is appropriate. When a student is on home and hospital teaching, of course, virtual instruction is what we need. We also have an in-school virtual program for students who, for a variety of reasons, can't schedule a particular class, and this requires the principal's permission. Some students thrived in the virtual setting, and there was discussion of creating a virtual academy last year. I think a virtual academy would be very, very valuable for those who, for one reason or another, cannot attend school in person. Other counties do it, but the financial costs are prohibitive. I believe we should investigate how we could implement a virtual academy and how it could be paid for, but the teaching and learning effectiveness would be measured like any other class through formative and summative assessments.
Very good. Steve?
Thank you. Yeah, having been a teacher, not only in the K through 12 system, but also as someone who taught undergraduate classes virtually, I think virtual teaching is an ideal tool that we should still use and cultivate in certain circumstances. Virtual teaching does not replace in-person instruction. It just can't, especially with our early childhood education folks, folks in the elementary schools in particular, our special needs students. It is obvious, based on the release of recent NAEP scores, that virtual learning under a long period of time failed our children. But I am so appreciative of every single teacher in our county that responded quickly, rapidly, and got our students back to school so much faster than our neighboring counties. Our teachers were amazing, despite having almost no training to implement virtual learning, and I'm so proud of their efforts. But we definitely need to use it for extended learning opportunities to tutor our children. We definitely need to use it for VOTEC and language issues. I would also like to see it used for advanced placement and advanced courses where you have students that are compliant, that don't need a whole lot of redirection and getting back on task. But we definitely should cultivate and use the tool as appropriate, and obviously use it for things like snow days and whatnot. But we need to focus on education, making sure that our students are continuously educated, and virtual teaching is a tool, but it should not be relied upon.
Thank you very much. Patricia?
Okay, I'll start by saying nothing really beats in-person teaching and learning. Social interaction and connections with teachers and peers are certainly enhanced with in-person instruction. However, there are times when the virtual platform is needed. Mainly, some of those times are when a student's health sort of dictates that, or if the school does not have the enrollment to support specialties, such as specific foreign languages, or to be used on snow days so the ending of the year doesn't lag into the summer months. The academic achievement of the majority of our CCPS students was certainly impacted by virtual learning, and accountability procedures were lessened during the pandemic. So we need to go back to a strong focus on teaching and learning, and we would measure all effectiveness based on grade level benchmark assessments and state standards.
Okay, very good. All right, question number 3 then. James will start this round off.
Thank you. Did you want to read a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll read it first. That's
I wrote
okay.
it on the teleprompter.
That's not a problem. Just for the benefit of the audience,
Yeah,
what is the biggest challenge facing Carroll County Public Schools today, and what steps do you propose to address that change, or that challenge, excuse me?
Thank you. So I think it's important as a board member that we're able to address multiple issues at a time or challenges at a time. So this question is difficult because depending on who you ask, everybody's gonna have a different opinion. I'm gonna use 2 because I think they're 1A and 1B to me. Financially, we have a challenge coming down the line with Blueprint and capital improvements in our schools. When we look at Blueprint, we're proposed to be 24th out of 24 counties in funding. On average, CCPS receives less than $1,000 per student from the state. The average is almost $2,500, and the city receives almost $5,700. So as the state comes in and mandates, the funding behind, or the financial burden of Blueprint, Carroll County is going to be asked to step up and do it on our own, basically through Carroll County dollars. And under the current tax structure, if it's not available from the commissioners, we're going to have a hard time implementing Blueprint. That's going to be a challenge. It's a big challenge coming down the line. I believe my background in finance will help there. I hope I'm able to negotiate with the commissioners to ensure that CCPS schools are getting the funding that's necessary to implement Blueprint as proposed. Secondly, the second challenge is learning loss. I think we just talked about virtual learning, so this kind of comes right behind it. And I think we're going to ask a lot of our teachers to try to get our kids up to speed. I'm a big believer in using some of our students who excel to tutor younger students. We did it back when I was younger. My wife and I talked about it last night. She was a tutor for elementary school kids in high school. And also bring back parents back into the classroom, the community, to help. We've moved away from parent volunteers, so we have to figure out ways to attack it without asking our teachers to take too much of the burden.
Very good. Tom?
Okay, we all know our school system is facing challenges. Making sure our students are receiving on-grade level instruction is number one. Dealing with the behavioral and mental health needs in our buildings is absolutely part of the equation. With the help of engaged parents, we need to return to normal, where expectations are clear and our educators get the support they need. So I think supporting our educators is our biggest challenge. They feel overwhelmed and underappreciated. When you look at the pay scales of our surrounding counties, we don't look so good. And I know most teachers don't come to Carroll for the pay. They come because we have great kids, great communities, and great schools. But our educators are professionals who deserve to be compensated fairly. Our support personnel need a living wage. Our educators also need to feel respect, feel as if they are being listened to. You can't say we have great teachers and then accuse them of indoctrinating our kids in the same breath. It doesn't work that way. Our educators are on the front lines every day. We need to be listening to them so we can hear how to better improve our system. I've had several exchanges with parents frustrated with the turnover in their child's school. New counselor, new advisor, new administrator. Students have trouble navigating all that. And the politically motivated attacks on our educators impact what happens in our schools. I am committed to sitting down with our teachers and our building level administrators and our content supervisors to find out what we really need to be focused on to move forward.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, again, I've said since day one that learning loss is, I think, the greatest challenge facing our county. The release of the recent NAEP scores prove that. And again, I'm really concerned that the state won't release its specific scores other than we recently received the science scores. But I'm just convinced that the misguided politicians and the teacher union leaders that worked so hard to keep our schools closed created this problem. It's lost in the conversation somewhere was that parents didn't know what was right and what wasn't, and we wanted our children back in school, and we needed that back in school. But we need to use the existing metrics that we've got, if they're going to be released hopefully soon, to determine what students need interventions more than the others. I suspect it will be our students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades and those in 9th, 10th, and 11th. They missed critical basic skills learning, in-person learning with certified teachers, and virtual learning just wasn't something that we were able to meet the needs. But we also need to rely on our teachers to identify, they know the students as well, along with parents, on which ones need help the most. Provide our educators with special services, IAs, ESPs, special educators, to give kids the interventions they need when they need it. But we need to focus on education and academics.
Okay, thank you. Patricia?
Our number one mission as board members is the education of our students. So the biggest challenge facing us is the academic achievement of our students. To address the challenge, each student must be engaged in rigorous instruction and held accountable for their learning and behavior. We must set high targets and standards, and we must focus instruction and target that on the assessed needs of our learners. We must use formative and summative assessment data to help us target our instruction. So again, it's really looking out for the academic achievement of our students as our biggest challenge. And as we've all noted, you know, we're coming back from the pandemic and trying to get things back to normal in some sense of the word. So again, we need to go back to holding our students accountable for their learning, and we need to make sure that we're providing the first-time instruction and expecting our students to be attentive and to gain from the first-time instruction. So it's all about the academic achievement of our students.
Okay, thank you. Amanda?
So I'm going to start, like Mr. Miller said, there's a laundry list of challenges, but I think they're all related. So bear with me. There's increasing needs for school building updates, improved educator wages, after-school and alternative programs like dual enrollment and career in tech, increased emphasis on early childhood education. Schools are facing enrollment declines and teacher shortages. Standardized test scores have dropped. More students are experiencing emotional and behavioral distress. Students have missed out on critical instruction and supportive services, have been socially isolated during the pandemic, and they're now adapting to a world that's changed dramatically in the past several years. Teachers are overworked, overwhelmed, undervalued, and exiting their noble profession in record numbers. But all of this leads to less than optimal student performance, which, as Dr. Dorsey said, is our main mission. If elected, I'll work to improve the working and learning environment for all. This includes enhancing access to wraparound services, technology, and alternative education models to increase equity and opportunities for success, address bullying and promote a culture of inclusive education, work to recruit, retrain, and empower highly qualified school system employees, and provide better training, increase compensation, and prioritize more diverse hires. I think that full funding and implementation of the blueprint will go a long way toward addressing many of these aims, but first, we will need to get all the key contributors to student success: parents, educators, students themselves, community organizations, and local officials to collaborate in a respectful and productive way so that we can get things done.
Okay, we have 3 questions to go, and Tom will lead off this particular question. How does Carroll County Public Schools compare to other school systems throughout Maryland for overall performance, and what is needed to protect or improve that positioning?
Well, historically, Carroll County Public Schools have always been among the top in the state. You can look at graduation rates, attendance, state testing scores. Carroll is right there at the top because we have dedicated educators who are committed to putting their students first. People who have not spent their careers in education don't understand the importance of the culture for learning that exists in our schools. Our teachers and sports staff are there for one reason, and that's to help our students be successful. And how are we going to continue to improve our position? Well, first, we need to let our educators do their jobs. That's what we've been trained to do. That's what we know how to do. We need to trust our teachers and administrators. They need competitive salaries, or we won't be able to attract and retain the best there is. Secondly, we need to partner with our parents. We all know that when parents are engaged and involved with their children's education, students do better. Volunteering, parent conferences, communicating with the school are all beneficial. The simple task of logging into Home Access Center to keep track of your child's progress is crucial. Yet you would be surprised at the number of parents who either can't or don't. Finally, when parents, students, and educators come together, our schools will thrive as the neighborhood centers of the greater community. Our schools have play days, sporting events, concerts, food truck Fridays. All these things build community, and we know that when children are part of a positive community, they do better academically.
Very good. Steve?
Yeah, I'm so proud of the performance of our Carroll County public school system. It is truly remarkable what we do with little funding we get. The Kerwin formula has not been kind to Carroll County. We rank so low per pupil funding compared to other jurisdictions. And frankly, myself being an educator, I'm just wondering how we do it. And that's because we have amazing teachers. We have a lot to work on, and we have a lot to improve upon based on the recent release of scores. But we need to make sure that we continue to trust our teachers, and we need to make sure that we maximize every single minute we have in our schools. Few people understand and realize just how little instruction time occurs in our schools. It's literally 270 minutes a day, 4.5 hours of instruction typically. We just can't waste any minute on anything other than academics. We have to make sure that we omit things related to political and social agendas that we see happening in many jurisdictions around the state, especially around the country. It's not that prevalent here in Carroll County. We need to keep it that way. We need to focus on the core fundamentals of education include parents, because research shows that kids thrive when parents and teachers work together for students. So I'm going to defend our parents and defend our students, and we're going to keep CCPS great.
Thank you. Patricia?
In looking at that question, we have to keep in mind that there were no assessments administered in 2019-2020, and the state administered a shortened assessment for the 2020-2021 school year, and that was administered during the early fall of 21-22. And when we look at the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, the MCAP results, our students did quite well in comparison to other students throughout the state. In fact, based on the state comparison and with Carroll County, in all of the areas, our Carroll County students performed higher than the state basic average. There was one exception, and that was grade 10 for the ELA. We were a few points lower than the state. As far as our Maryland Integrated Science Assessment in the state, our students in grades 5 and 8 ranked top. Well, it was the 5th grade students in Carroll County, I'm sorry, that ranked top in the state, and the 8th grade students ranked 7th highest in the state as far as science is concerned. So to improve our standing, again, we need to make sure that we're setting high targets and standards for our students, and then focusing our instruction on their needs so that they can continue to succeed.
Okay. Amanda?
There's so many ways to assess performance, from test scores to education spending to safety, diversity, and educator satisfaction. I've seen Carroll listed all over state rankings, but most typically in the top 5 counties. Our graduation rates are high, but our academic achievement rates have recently declined, although we've done better in ELA than in math proficiency. I have experience in a wide range of executive leadership roles, including founding outpatient clinic director, program director for the Masters in OT, and representative of my college to the University Budget Committee. I also hold a graduate certificate in translational investigations, which is the science of interpreting and applying knowledge and statistics for practical use. I understand strategic planning, curriculum development, budget deliberation, and program evaluation. Each of these skills will allow me to work with board members and district leadership to develop and put in place a concerted plan to address both academic preparation and real-world skills, media literacy, interpersonal communication, and ethics. We need to take advantage of funding incentives to include more evidence-based learning materials, like the Orton-Gillingham approach to literacy. We also need to directly target those students who experience opportunity gaps, which put them at risk for poorer academic outcomes, and provide more individualized instruction and resources to support their learning and development.
Thank you. James?
Thank you. Dr. Dorsey stole my statistics, but I'll expand on them a little bit. So, you know, anybody knows I'm a baseball player. We love stats. So anyway, the Maryland Integrated Science Assessment was the only score that we had that came out. As Dr. Dorsey mentioned, we were first in 5th grade. We had 44.8% of our students at a level 3 or above. And what that means is level 3 is above, and 4 is excellent. Level 2 is developing learners, and level 1's beginning learners. So we had 44.8% of our 5th grade students, which was number 1 in the state. The average is 30.6. 7th grade, 8th grade, we were 7th, 43.4%. We're at level 3 or above, and the state average was 35.4. Now, when I posted this, gosh, when it came out back in August, I got a lot of flack because I celebrated that. And a lot of people said, well, 44.8%, that's terrible, without really understanding what that meant. We do a great job in Carroll County, and anytime I've seen an assessment where the number 1 county is at 44.8%, I really look at the grading rather than the assessment. But with that being said, I think it falls back on how great our teachers are. We have our students prepared, and a lot of it is the partnership with parents. If there's anything I learned growing up in Carroll County, my kids being in Carroll County, is there truly is a parent-teacher partnership that's not really seen across the state. You know, we get emails sent home. Teachers reach out. They proactively try to provide instruction to students, and they proactively try to get parents involved. And that partnership is really what drives the success in Carroll County. So when I look at Carroll County and why I love, you know, our schools and our teachers, it really is that relationship, and that's what drives our success.
Very good. Tom?
Didn't I answer that question?
Okay, I'm sorry. All right. We'll try Steve then. We haven't picked on him yet, so Steve will get the next question. How would you plan to address teacher shortages, retention, and the number of students to teacher class ratios?
Well, again, two-part question. I will say the first part of the question, thankfully, our county does not have a drastic problem with teacher shortage or retention compared to other jurisdictions. I know that some folks like to suggest that there's a huge problem, but there truly isn't. When we started the school year, I think we had 7 vacancies. Compare and contrast that with, say, Baltimore County that had over 400 vacancies. So, you know, the problem with teacher retention and teacher shortage is not as severe as folks may paint that out to be. We obviously need to address the salary deficit with regards to the teacher salaries. And look, I was a teacher. It's crazy what teachers are paid with the training they have and the responsibility that they're being charged to execute. And honestly, my anger and my ire lies with the state legislature and the majority party, which essentially cheats Carroll County for funding. When we receive just 34 cents of every dollar we send to Annapolis, whereas Baltimore City gets $3.75 for every dollar they send. That's why we can't pay our teachers, and that's not fair. But as Mr. Miller mentioned, we have a great teacher-parent partnership, and that's what drives down behavior problems, drives up student achievement. And with regards to the last point, class sizes, we really do need to take a comprehensive look at redistricting. That is the only tool in our arsenal to make sure we have small class sizes, and small class sizes mean greater student achievement.
Thank you. Patricia.
We must address both recruitment and retention of teachers. One thing that we can certainly do that doesn't cost us is we have to treat teachers respectfully. And we, along with treating them respectfully and professionally, we should build in some structures to enhance their success. Structures such as common planning time so they can collaborate and plan together to meet students' needs. Also, we must allow them some input in their own professional development. As has been shared, we should look at our salary structure and we should try to make our salaries competitive with those of surrounding areas. One element of the blueprint is to raise the status of the profession of teaching so that the teaching profession will be treated equally. Or the same as other professions requiring the same level of education. So I think all of those things sort of rolled together will help us when we recruit and retain our teachers. But as I mentioned at the onset, I think the number one thing that we can do certainly is to make sure that we're treating our teachers respectfully. We're showing them trust and respect.
Okay, Amanda.
Thank you. So I think when the numbers first came out at the start of the school year, they did look pretty good. But my understanding is that the vacancies didn't include special educators. And in fact, the state just recently notified the counties that the provisional certificate process is not valid for special education. So we have some planning to do. But what can we do about this? So in the short term, we should provide incentives for new teachers and those in the training pipeline to find their home in Carroll schools. We have to work to change the culture of the system so that our support and respect for educators is explicitly communicated and demonstrated at all levels, which makes Carroll a much more attractive place to work and to stay. We can also be more transparent about vacancies and turnover. So this will help us identify inequities and areas that we can target for improvement. Ultimately, we need to work to increase educator and staff compensation across the board. Keep up with the steps, build capacity by offering more support for professional development and leadership opportunities. We know that more individualized instruction is critical to student success, so we must decrease out-of-classroom teacher workload, increase support staff, and think about space planning, which may include thoughtful redistricting and building expansions.
James?
Thank you. Going back to statistically, since that was the question of retention and shortages, the state average attrition rate is 10%. Carroll County is right on 10%. So we're right at the state average there. But what I looked at was vacancies at the start of each school year, going back to the 2018-19 school year. 18, we had 1, which ranked first in the state. 19, we had 0, which ranked first in the state. In 20, we had 14, which is the highest we had in 5 years, and that was still 4th in the state. 21, we had 3.5, which was first in the state. In 22, we were first in the state. And the 7, actually, I emailed to find out, and those 7 were instructional assistants and special educators were the 7 that we were short. There was 0, I guess you can call it, say, in regular teachers, however you want to describe it. But anyway, So we do a good job in Carroll County. But with that being said, I think we have to look at the fact that we put a lot on our teachers. I look at, I hear a lot from teachers that their planning time's been shortened or taken away or being used to monitor hallways or bathrooms or something other than planning. We ask a lot for professional development and continuous education and ask them to do that on their free time or not during school hours, which is tough. So how can we help? I think, one obviously is trying to give them back time in their day to plan and develop lesson plans and not ask them to monitor bathrooms or do other things. And then in terms of teacher-class ratio, as I said, when we had 5 high schools in the state, we actually had 3 high schools that were above the state average. They were very large. They were 3A schools, and 1 was a 4A. We're all 2A, 1A school now, which means we're below the state average. So we're actually doing better than we were before Manchester Valley and Century were built, but we have to take a comprehensive look at redistricting to ensure we maintain that.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, for now, teacher shortages and retention are not at a crisis level here in Carroll. We have more teachers with provisional certification than I would like to see, but we also have one of the least diverse staffs in the state with about 6% minority, while our student population is 19%. We all know that special education is an area with great needs that often go unmet. And obviously, we do need to look at salaries. The starting salary in Carroll is below that of our surrounding counties, and it's been like that for as long as I've been here. But when you look 5 years out and beyond, our pay scale is way behind other neighboring counties except for Frederick. There is no built-in incentive for our teachers to stay in the county other than working conditions. If you look at how our educators were treated these past 2 years, it's a miracle we didn't lose more. The number of administrators and teachers who left mid-year tells a story. Teachers worked harder than ever under the most challenging of conditions, yet we heard they didn't want to work. When I taught creative writing, one thing I said to my students over and over is, don't tell me, show me. If we want to attract and retain our best educators, we need to show them the respect they deserve, and we need to pay them a competitive salary. Class size and teacher-student ratios are not negotiated in the contracts by state law, and there are overcrowded classes, no question. But the only way to solve that problem is through more funding from the county and the state. On a bright side, though, I'm excited that the Teacher Academy of Maryland is now part of the Career Tech Center because we want these homegrown educators returning to Carroll County.
Okay, very good. All right, we've cycled through, I believe, at this point in time, and we're going to start all over again. So, Patricia, you'll get question number 6. What is your view on school security and school resource officer placement in schools?
School security is certainly paramount. We can't expect our students to learn and our teachers to teach if they're in environments that are not safe. So school security certainly is important, and it's the paramount importance. Our SROs have proven to be very valuable additions to our schools. They demonstrate an understanding of their role in relation to the role of administrators, and they actually serve as positive role models for our students. So again, SROs are very much an integral part of our Carroll County schools at this point, and we're very grateful to have them. At our central office level, our security department is made up of 2 professionals who provide input, training, and support to all of our school safety teams. They also make sure that appropriate drills are held throughout the year so that students and staff members can practice what to do in various safety scenarios. Another element of the school security is that we're making sure that the equipment that is in our schools is being updated on a continuous basis. So again, I think everybody would agree that school security is certainly at the top of the list as far as importance is concerned.
Okay. Amanda?
So this week, I shared on my social media some deeply personal thoughts about my own experiences with school violence. And I also shared that Monday's shooter in St. Louis had left a note stating that he didn't have any friends or family, had been isolated his entire life, and that this was the perfect storm for a mass shooter. When I hear from other candidates that I'd be wasting time and resources on social emotional learning instead of focusing on the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic, I wonder how we could possibly expect students, especially those who have been through so much disruption and isolation these past few years, to be able to learn effectively without first caring for their mental well-being. In addition to gun violence, I'm concerned about drug use, bullying, and harassment in the schools. Of course, I want to focus on academics. I'm an educator, and I've made that my life's work. But we must work to create a culture of respect and mutual accountability at all levels in CCPS so that our community is not touched by tragedy as so many have been. This includes completing comprehensive school safety assessments, continuing to partner with the excellent school resource officers. In fact, I'd be supportive of expanding the SRO program, but only after we commit to hiring more mental health professionals. I think we need to increase prevention strategies and staff training on behavioral threat assessment and management, enhance mental health supports, educate and monitor on social media use, and provide more counseling and support staff to give focused attention to students in need of that support. School shootings and other violent behaviors are preventable.
James.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of that, and I think it starts with changing the policy around how we protect bullies. I've spoke about this several times. The restorative justice policy in the state of Maryland that allows students to continuously be bullied over and over and over again by the same student in a classroom drives that. I would like to see us go back to the days of where we hold bullies accountable. Social media doesn't help. Tom and I talked about it a little bit before. Kids can't escape it these days. So it's unfortunate that we have to talk about school resource officers. But luckily in Carroll County, Sheriff DeWeese and the job that he does is phenomenal. I had the privilege of talking to him a couple weeks ago about the school resource officers, and they put a lot of time and effort in choosing those resource officers. They make sure they fit for the school. They make sure that they're able to, you know, be role models for the students. They just don't take any officer to put them in our schools, which I think is great. I would like to see it expanded. I would like to see them at every school in the county. Currently, the high schools have them. They're shared between the elementary and middle schools. I've said it before. I believe there's two things that anybody would agree on that should be funded by our tax dollars, and that's education and public safety. And I think they go hand in hand. If you're able to have a safe community with great education, then your property values go up, which means tax revenue goes up, which means we can pay our teachers, right? So I think when I look at this, I agree. We have to look at how we make sure kids don't get to a point where they feel like the only outlet is to take lives or take their own. But with that being said, having a resource officer there in the classroom is the first line of defense, or in the school building is the first line of defense. Okay. Thank you.
Tom.
School security is, of course, very important. Our security team of Curtis Pierce and Brian Elliott do a tremendous job. For example, last summer they went around and checked every exterior door in every school to be sure they were locked and working properly. The recent shooting in St. Louis proves that secure doors are crucial to school safety. The Sheriff's Department also worked on creating a clear and consistent method of identifying every exterior door. I think we all agree that our SRO program here in Carroll County is a model for the rest of the state. We need to give credit to Sheriff Jim DeWeese, Lieutenant Phil Lawrence, who oversees the program, for selecting the right candidates and providing the appropriate training for the job. These officers are integral parts of the schools where they serve. Each high school has a dedicated SRO officer, and the middle schools and elementary schools share officers. The funding to expand that program would have to come from the county commissioners. But to step back and look at school safety research, there is zero evidence to support a further hardening of our schools. What is shown to be effective is a positive working relationship between our schools, mental health providers, and law enforcement. We need early identification and interventions with mental health concerns and substance abuse. Staff needs professional development to support the positive mental health in our students. Let's not forget that the importance of the culture of kindness to help reduce bullying. And finally, we actually need more research to better understand what is effective and what is not.
Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, again, as a retired military officer, security and planning and issues related to security are something that I used throughout my 20-year career in the Navy. You know, you're trained to be proactive and ready and to have plans. And I want to make sure that we have every open line of communication with law enforcement possible. I definitely want SROs in our schools. It's nice to hear that some of the folks running for the Board of Education have changed their tune somewhat and recognize that our SROs are a critical part of ensuring that our staff and our students are safe. It is absolutely paramount that we retain them, that they be a ready reaction force to respond to threats, that they be there to deter drugs, bullying, gun violence, and we definitely need them in our schools. And I think about safety from bus pickup to bus drop-off and every second in between. I want to make sure that we have safety, adequate safety at sporting events. And I want to make sure, as a former business owner of a cybersecurity company, I want to make sure that we look at cybersecurity as well, protecting our students that use devices, protecting people from accessing them, and then making sure that they don't access inappropriate sites. But above all else, I want to train our teachers to recognize kids in distress so that we can stop violence before it happens in our schools.
Okay, thank you. The candidates have now answered all 6 of the prepared questions, so we'll move on now to the randomly selected questions. And I'll ask Heather to join me and actually conduct the drawing out of the trick-or-treat box that we have for tonight.
All right. Good evening. Sorry.
Again, this is a combination of questions that were submitted electronically. We collected all of those, a great number of those, and then questions that have been submitted by audience members here in attendance tonight. So it's a combination of all of those questions. Heather, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Skip. All right. Good evening. Let's see. First question. Probably should have left the candy in there too, huh? More interesting. All right. So here is the first question. What organizations have you volunteered for in the past 5 years, and in what capacity?
And we'll continue the rotation, so we'll start with Amanda.
Sure. Gosh, in the past 5 years, so currently I am the advisor for the Carroll County chapter of Students Demand Action, which is working against gun violence in the schools and in the community. So I am actively the advisor for that position. I volunteer with Special Olympics frequently and have served as a coach of both the gymnastics and cheerleading teams at various times. I serve on a board of directors as a visitor for a special needs summer camp and therapeutic recreation program. I have a number of roles at Towson University where I supervise student groups as well. And then, of course, I actively volunteer in my children's schools, particularly at Freedom Elementary School. I was most recently the chair of the Before and After School Care Committee. So we were working to interview and put in place a new contract for the care provider, work to survey parents about their needs and interests, and then I volunteer in the classrooms, getting to know the different teachers and other volunteers, members of the PTA at various events and so forth.
James.
Thank you. So the last 5 years. Currently the Vice President of North Carroll Rec Council, currently the President transitioning out after 5 years of the North Carroll Girls Lacrosse program. I volunteered with North Carroll to coach lacrosse, basketball, and soccer for my 3 daughters. But I think the biggest thing is, since we're talking about the last 5 years, that's the last 5 years. But, since I've been in Carroll County, I've always served the community through athletics, and people know that and sometimes give me a hard time for that, as some don't feel like that's volunteerism. But those who know the time and effort that goes into providing the youth with an opportunity to play sports and the youth with an opportunity for an outlet, it's why I spent my time, early part of COVID, advocating our commissioners to get them back on the fields, because it really is a place for them to build relationships, to build life skills, friendships, and they have mentors like coaches and who volunteer their time to do that. So that was me in the last 5 years.
Okay. Tom?
5 years, hard to. I was a member, going way back, a member of the Carroll Players for many, many years. We put on community theater twice a year, and we also had a yearly scholarship that we presented to Carroll County students who were interested in following theatric arts in college. So I did that scholarship for many, many years, more than I can count. For several years, I was on the Carroll County Democratic Central Committee. We worked in trying to get candidates elected, trying to actually recruit candidates to run for office is mostly what we tried to do. I was in the school system, of course. I did after-school activities. The drama club was the biggest one that I did for many years, directed several plays, worked on the the tech crews or help over supervise the tech crews. Most recently, I'm on the Environmental Advisory Council with the Carroll County government. This past year, we did 3 big projects. We worked on a litterless guide and how to reduce litter in the county. We worked on a recycling guide, but we worked with the recycling department. And the last thing we did was a de-icing handout to explain how to prevent salts into the water stream and into the environment.
Steve?
I'm going to get in a lot of trouble with my wife here because she says I do too much. But I am a proud member of the Freedom District Lions Club in the Sykesville area. I currently serve on their education committee and also on their veterans committee. So proud that we get to review the scholarship packages for many of the high schools in South Carroll County. But we select the winners of those. Also in the veterans committee. I'm also the current vice chair of the Carroll County Veterans Advisory Commission, nominated by our commissioners to serve on that commission, and I currently serve as the vice chair there. I'm a member of the American Legion Post 223 in Sykesville. I'm also a lifetime member of our Veterans of Foreign Wars, our VFW post. And I'm also an active judge for the Military Child of the Year program for Operation Homefront, where we review remarkable young men and women in our middle schools and high schools that do amazing things around the country. And we pick the winners every year, and they get scholarships, and they get awarded every year at the in an area near the Pentagon annually. So I'm really proud to be associated with that. And then finally, I'm still an advisor for previous organizations that I served on their boards of directors. I'm an advisor for the Tower Federal Credit Union, which is a 501c1, $4 billion in assets currently. And I'm also an advisor for the Coalition for the Preservation of Southwest Baltimore County, a 501c4.
Very good. Tricia?
Basically, my volunteer activities can be categorized in 2 different areas, one being my church and the other being our Maryland Association of Boards of Ed. At my church, I'm involved with helping with our program that's designed to help feed the needy in the community. It's called My Brother's Keeper Food Pantry, and it's in conjunction with the Maryland Food Bank. We get thousands of pounds of food from the Maryland Food Bank, and we make it available at our food pantry to those who are in need in the community. Also, as a part of my church, I'm very active with our music and drama productions. Every Christmas and every Easter, putting on wonderful productions. I'm also a co-director of our Vacation Bible School during the summer months, and even when we had to do our VBS virtually, it was still a successful opportunity for our students and our children in the community to be involved in learning. I'm also my church historian and part of our membership committee. And as far as MABE is concerned, I serve on the equity committee, the budget committee. I'm one of the board of directors, and also involved with the conference program committee, where we plan professional development for local boards throughout the state of Maryland. So I'm busy.
Yes, you are. Okay. Is it possible to reset the clock for 1 minute rather than a minute and a half? For the second round of questions, if we could hold it to 1 minute rather than a minute and a half, I think that might be helpful because of the number of questions that we have. Very good. Okay. Heather,
All right.
question number 2, and we'll start with James.
James, can you express your views on the public participation issue at the Board of Education meetings?
All right, I only have a minute, so I'm going to start quick. I just wrote about this, actually, because it was in the Carroll County Times. I am very much against limiting any public participation. I firmly believe, as an elected official, if I have to show up at 5 p.m. and stay to 5 a.m. to hear the concerns of everybody in Carroll County, that's what I'll do. So when this question, I mean, I won't take a whole minute, I don't think, because I could just say I'm against any limiting of public participation when it becomes an elected official. I believe it's important to hear input. both sides. I think as a board member, I have to keep an open mind, and the only way really to hear the concerns of the county is to ensure that they have the opportunity to speak. I know some send emails, some write and get their public comment in that way, but if there's a line out the door, I can guarantee you, with the only one, that's fine. I will sit there all night if needed to ensure that everybody who pays their tax dollars or has a stake, whether teacher, grandparent, has the right to comment.
Yeah, I mean, I understand kind of the rationale behind it, because the meetings sometimes go on for hours and hours. And I think the idea was to shorten it, and there was, I think, some animosity that was happening. But basically, you can't limit, public participation. We want to hear from the public, just like Mr. Miller said. I mean, that's kind of part of our job, is to be able to listen to what citizens have to say. Getting input is important. The other part that I kind of suggested, I don't know if it'll ever go anywhere, is to go back to having 2 Board of Ed meetings per month. There used to be 2 per month, and we could have 1 Board of Education meeting that was focused primarily on citizen participation, hearing from the public, and another Board of Education that could be focused on business and getting the business done. So you wouldn't have a 6-hour meeting, you'd have 2 3-hour meetings.
Steve?
Okay, yeah, my views are very similar to Mr. Miller, and again, it was profiled in the Carroll County Times. That limiting participation is a non-starter for me, but it's really important that we structure it in a way where we can execute the business of the Board of Ed in a responsible, quick way. As Mr. Scanlon mentioned, bringing meetings late into the hours just isn't ideal. But I would be in favor of structuring a format where you have like maybe the first 10 to 12 speakers, then you do your business, and then at the conclusion of business you have more speakers. But it's really important that we hear from the public. Elected officials need to hear from those who elected them. And it's really important to get that feedback, particularly now that we're going to be going through the redistricting, particularly since we have these scores that were released where I know the taxpayers want us to act, and they want to make sure we're accountable. And I want to hear from people that are out of the area. Maybe grandma lives over the line in PA, and it's important that grandma gets to testify.
I think what has happened in an effort to trying to streamline our meetings so that they're not running super late, Mr. Kyler, we were trying to come up with a way to again, streamline those meetings. I am certainly concerned with the optics of that, though. It looks like we're trying to limit public participation, and really, that's not what I'm about. I certainly welcome input from the community. And, we can look at maybe some other possible structures. As Mr. Scanlon mentioned, maybe having 2 meetings per month so that we can build in time to hear from more folks who are interested in sharing with us. Or maybe we can limit the number of minutes, because as we've seen tonight, 1 minute goes quickly, 1.5 minutes goes quickly. So maybe rather than 3 minutes, we can look at 2 minutes per participant and still hear from everyone who is interested in sharing with us. We don't want to cut off that public input.
Okay. Yeah, I think the intent with the recently proposed changes was probably positive, but some of the proposals were somewhat concerning, and I think it was actually really nice to see the community kind of come together and say, we don't in fact want to limit public participation no matter what side of the aisle you're on. To me, it's really about access, so thinking about, are there other ways that folks could participate, perhaps by joining virtually or having a separate listening session. But I also think we need to think about how important it is to have board members who are willing to engage with constituents from all perspectives, not people that will just make claims like, I'm always listening, or I'm committed to full transparency, and then continuously block or hide or delete comments and posts when they disagree or feel called out. So I think that if we say that we really want to hear from our constituents, then we need to listen to and engage with our constituents consistently, and again, from a diversity of perspectives.
Okay, very good. Next question.
All right. How do you feel about students and staff choosing their pronouns, using the bathroom of their choice, and playing on sports teams with their non-biological gender?
Tom?
You would have to start with me. Huh? Yeah, that yeah, we talked about this Monday night. It's very difficult. I think you know, some things are easier than others. You know, the pronoun thing. I think most people don't really worry about that too much. You know, and as we talked about this Monday night, that most students who are you know, either trans or gender fluid, they don't want to be public about it. They want to be quiet, go about, you know, what their school day without being obvious. So they will use the nurses' bathroom if they have to. Yeah, the new school, the Career Tech Center, has gender-neutral bathrooms, which I think is a great idea. But I do have concerns about biological males competing against females. Mr. Miller talked about how hard women fought for equality, and I agree with that.
Yeah, again, I really appreciate the question. This is really one of the fundamental topics that I hear from residents and neighbors when I knock on doors in our county. I think the vast majority of voters are just so tired of schools around the nation and in our state focusing on issues that are not related to academics. And you know what? Language matters, especially with young children, especially as it relates to the pronouns issue. You know, we confuse young children when we say it's okay to just use whatever pronoun you want. So I'm concerned about the confusion factor for young children who don't understand why people are changing pronouns. And more importantly, is that something that we should really even inject and introduce to our kids at such a young age anyway? I mentioned earlier this week about a situation in Orlando where a high school young lady went into a boys' locker room she identified as a boy and bared her chest in front of other students and staff. We really got to make sure that we manage our county so that we don't evolve into that situation up here in Carroll.
Tricia?
If a student at this point wants to change their name or be called by another name or to be referred to with a different set of pronouns, we're making it perfectly clear that that can only be done with the inclusion of the parent in a conference. So a student just can't, you know, share with the teacher that now this is what I want my name or my pronoun to be. So we do have to have a conference in which we would include certainly the parent, the administration, the counselor, and the student. So again, we're making sure that we're not doing anything other than being transparent and including the parents in those type discussions. Again, I had talked the other night as well about the non-gender private bathrooms. Again, you know, it's great if we could have those in all of our schools, and I know that's what we'll be looking at as we update our buildings.
Amanda?
This is obviously a really complicated issue that can't be discussed in 1 minute, but I do appreciate the opportunity to correct some grossly mischaracterization of some of my statements from Monday. They insinuated that I would withhold information about a child's mental health status or suicidal ideation from parents. And what I clearly said at the forum earlier this week is that if students are forced to reveal personal information to an unsafe adult, trusted professionals fear that they may become suicidal. This is incredibly scary. I sincerely hope that a family would never find themselves in this situation, but it is a real reality. I'd of course want to avoid this by helping parents to learn how to best support their children, even if they disagree with them, and to keep communication open with parents. I am someone who has committed my life to serving children and helping them to be healthy and develop and grow. And so to say that I would ever withhold mental health status information from a parent is just simply inaccurate.
James?
Thank you. So first, I want to say, Tom brought it up, the sports. I'll answer the questions hopefully as quick as possible. No, I do not believe a biological male or biological female should be participating in sports against the other gender. I think it creates an issue for women who, as Tom mentioned, I said, fought very hard for their right to have their own sport and the right to have opportunity for scholarships and have the right for opportunity to play competitively fairly. So I don't believe in that. As for students transitioning, I am 100% supportive of whatever family and that child decides that they want to do. If that child wants to transition, if that child wants to change their pronoun, and that's done with the parent's consent, then they 100% have that right to do that. It's not me to say how a parent or a family raises their child, just like it's not the school system's right to keep that information from me as a parent. It goes both ways. So as a parent, I expect to be notified and informed if something were to happen to my child, and I also as a parent would expect that the school would respect me and my choice if I decided that was what best for my child.
Okay. Next question. And we'll start with Steve.
All right. Pride flags have been a divisive issue for this county. Would you vote to overturn the current ruling by the Board of Education?
Well, quick answer is no. I would not overturn the current policy. I really think the flag policy is spot on, and what it does is it helps classrooms get back to learning. Again, the flag doesn't ban, or the policy doesn't ban anything. It just simply states what flags can be affixed to the walls and the structure of the classrooms, but students and staff are free to wear items on their person that make them feel comfortable and that maybe can help signify to other students that they may be an ideal person to talk to. But it's really important that we don't allow our classrooms to be an epicenter for activism, whether that activism occurs from those folks that espouse to the left or those folks that espouse to principles on the right. We are a nonpartisan office, and we need to make sure that we conduct our schools in a nonpartisan way. And we need to teach kids to think critically and understand that there are two sides of a perspective, and they should explore both.
Tricia.
I think everyone would agree that it's certainly appropriate to have the American flag, the state flag, and the county flag in each of our classrooms. I think the part that's really created some concern is from a group of students, the LGBTQ plus group of students who really feel unsupported. In the past, they've been able to see the flag, some call it the pride flag or the pride emblem, and that was something that they looked at as a safe space. My teacher is creating a safe space for me. Again, do teachers need that emblem there to show that they're creating a safe space? No, probably not, but if the students are saying it really helps them, I just feel that that's a group that we really haven't listened to. So I would think rather than overturning the current policy, I think we should look at some exceptions.
Okay. So I think there's, first of all, a difference between the spirit and the letter of a policy. So even if you believe that displaying a pride flag or limiting the display of a pride flag is kind of a symbolic gesture, the fact that this was enacted during Pride Month, the fact that it has clearly, we've heard from so many community members how hurtful and harmful this policy is, that's why I stated that I would move to repeal it. I think it was a massive waste of time, and I think that there's other ways. We have existing policies that limit the extent to which teachers can talk about their own personal political beliefs in the classroom, and I think that makes sense. The pride flag, though, isn't political, and displaying a flag of any sort is also not activism. I think I learned a lot just by hearing Mr. Whistler speak about the fact that there are two sides to something. I believe that there are multiple sides, multiple perspectives. We need to embrace all of them and not just see things as black and white, and I think that that's a major differentiation between the way that we approach the world.
James.
All right, so the fact that we're talking about it for the second time in a week shows that it actually is a divisive issue.
Yes.
So it's a distraction. A teacher can support a student by putting a pin on their sweatshirt, by putting a pin on their collar, by putting a pin on their shirt. They can wear it. There's nothing preventing that. The only question I have for exceptions is who decides and what flags are we going to allow or disallow. So we talk about the students who feel that they're not being supportive. I have compassion for that, and there's ways we can support them. One, let's stop allowing bullies to continuously bully them, okay? I've said it before. My daughter wore a rainbow headband just the other night with a P on it. She got picked on the moment she walked through the door. Nothing happened, anybody picked on her, and thank God she kept it on and stood her ground and was proud to wear it. I was happy to let her walk out the door with it. She's allowed to. It's on her person. But I'm going to ask this. Anybody up here who wants it up in there, who's going to make the decision on the exceptions? And where do we draw the line? And the fact that we spent all this time on it shows it's divisive in the community and distracts from learning. Let's support these students another way and move on.
Tom?
Yeah, I spoke against the new flag policy at 2 Board of Ed meetings. Creating a warm and inviting in classroom is what we want our teachers to do. It has nothing to do with politics. And as I've said previously, our LGBTQ students already feel marginalized and misunderstood. Why would you create a policy that further makes them feel unaccepted? Then there was the unintended consequences, the 9/11 flag, Blue Lives Matter flag, Ukrainian flag. Having said all that, reversing the flag policy is not a priority for me right now. We've already had so much disagreement about it. I think we're all sick of the political posturing that has distracted the board from its job of providing a solid education for our students. And secondly, there are workarounds. There are many ways for our staff to demonstrate their classrooms or other offices, wherever they are in the school, is a safe space. There are other ways for our educators to show respect. And right now, we just need to bring the focus back on academics.
Okay. Next question will be led off by Patricia.
All right. Do you think your ticket has run an honest, clean campaign with integrity?
I'll say yes and be ready to pass it on. That is one of the ideals that certainly those who have been involved with my campaign have demonstrated. And I'm just very thankful that my treasurer, Rich Huss, has high ideals. My son, Greg, who is the chairperson of our committee, also has high ideals. And again, our interest is in showing what I, as a candidate, possess, what I can do to help support the students here in Carroll County. Honestly, I am not interested in tearing anyone down or saying what someone else is or isn't doing. I'm focusing on myself and on the campaign that we're running, and I think that helps us to keep our eyes focused on the candidate and, again, the integrity that we certainly demonstrate in my campaign.
I'm really proud to have run a positive and a principled campaign for the past 14 months. I think it's important to understand that candidates and board members are part of the community. We're neighbors, and this is really why it's a shame that not all candidates have maintained a positive campaign. Some of them have resorted to attack ads, repeating known falsehoods despite being asked directly to stop and correct them, including earlier this week. And this type of campaigning is always distasteful. Nobody likes it, but it really doesn't make sense on a local level because these are folks that we see and interact with, we may even share a home school with. Good board members and candidates need to be available, responsive, professional, respectful, and effective in their communication. I have mentioned that I did need to draw some distinctions tonight between myself and my opponents, but I don't think anyone can argue that I haven't run a positive campaign that emphasizes my strengths, and I'm also proud to be part of a team that has done the same.
James?
Thank you. So personally, I think if you go to my Facebook page, you go to my website, there's not a negative piece on anybody out there. And actually, I'm going to hold my phone up, and I hope you guys can zoom in since it was brought up. 0 blocked followers on my Facebook account. And the reason for that is I said very on, I won't block anybody. And there's 0 on my Facebook page, 0. I don't know if I'm the only candidate, but I can only speak for myself. There's 0. In terms of a clean campaign, an honest campaign, integrity, I'm a part of this community, been a part of this community for almost my entire life. I've volunteered a ton of time in this community. I was threatened with a lawsuit from the MSEA within the last week. My campaign was attacked for supposedly a text message they sent out that I had no idea about. And the own lawyer for the MSEA sent a message to the other side to say he wasn't involved. Make a correcting statement, but instead they published it in the Carroll County Times. My integrity is the utmost importance to me, win or lose, And I'm proud that I've never blocked anybody. I'm proud I listen to everybody, and I just hope that we can move forward after this and become a better community.
Tom?
Yeah, I like what I've heard from everybody so far. I am very proud of the campaign I've run. My campaign has been positive, and I've focused squarely on the issues that our school system needs to be focused on. We need to put our students first, we need to be supporting our educators, and we need to partner with our parents to make our schools the centers of each community. And that's what I've been saying from day one. I've not attacked any of the other candidates. I've not spread misinformation or false information, and I wish I could say that about everyone here tonight. When people say things that aren't true, it's so hard not to respond. That's, because, like Jim said, if it's your integrity and somebody says something that's not true, you want to answer them. But, I've refrained from doing that because that just feeds the negativity. I've seen it over and over again. And, this is a community. We all live here in the same community. Our kids go to the same schools. Well, mine don't because they're adults, but you know what I mean.
Steve?
Yeah, I'm very proud that my family and I have funded the vast majority of my campaign, and I'm really proud to say that I don't answer to any special interest group, and so I'm really proud of that fact. I've never engaged in any personal attacks, and in fact, it's really sad to see that supporters for many of the candidates up here, and again, the two camps that have kind of coalesced together, the supporters on both sides that have engaged in such unbelievable behavior online socially is just sad. It's just very sad. Our children are watching it. Our children are seeing it. The hit pieces that have been done on me personally is really sad. I've even had stories said that I'm not a certified educator, that I faked my resume. My wife had somebody mail her some shelters because they insinuated that maybe I abused her. It's just really toxic how this race has evolved. And this race is about teachers, students, and parents.
Okay, very good. Next question. And we'll start with Amanda.
What have you learned over the past year that will make you a better advocate for our students and teachers?
Gosh, so much. So I've spent a lot of time meeting with commissioners, with school system leaders, with teachers, with parents, with students themselves. I've hosted several town halls. I've sent out surveys personally for my campaign, but also just had many, coffee dates and meetings at offices to just learn more about the school system kind of behind the scenes and also what people care about, right? So learning about what are the values that unite our community that we can come together on so that I can kind of focus my priorities as a board member. And I've also learned that a lot of people care very deeply about schools. The fact that we have over 300 active volunteers helping to support our campaigns is just incredible. The amount of time that they have poured into it and how deeply committed they are to seeing progress and the future of our school's success, it's just really heartening, and I'm really proud to be a part of that.
James?
So I've learned in the last year is the loud minority on both sides are not the majority. I'm in the community. I talk to parents. I talk to teachers. I talk to staff. I have family that works in many of the schools. I'm not going to say which ones. And most people, it's a pendulum. It swings one way too far. It swings the other way too far. It settles in the middle. And most people in Carroll County are in the middle. And they want great schools. They want supportive parents. They want supportive teachers. And they want to get back to education. I'll be honest with you, I hear all the time, stop wasting time on everything that's not focused on getting my child's learning loss brought back up to where they should be. Don't waste your time on anything until my child is back on grade level. And then we can talk about these other issues. But the biggest thing I learned is that the majority of Carroll County, 99.9% of them are great people, and they have a love for their children. We might not agree, but the fundamental agreement is they love their child and want the best for them.
Tom?
I agree with Jim there, totally. I've met with a lot of the commissioners too, and the things I learned is just the financial issues that they're dealing with, how to balance schools, sheriff's office, fire department, so there's that whole financial thing. Talked to so many different parents. Different parents have, different issues from different aspects of the schools. I mentioned the couple parents were talking about the turnover in their schools. Talked to another parent who was concerned that we didn't have enough of the agri-science classes and that they weren't graduation credits. So I guess the one thing I've learned the most is there's a lot more to learn. When you talk, every person you talk to, has a different angle, different aspect of what's going on, and it's our challenge to take all that in and to listen to those people. We're not going to have all the answers, but everyone wants a good school, a good community. That's absolute.
Steve?
Yeah, I've learned so much over this past year. We started this journey in January, and one of the things I think I've learned is that relationships matter. Relationship with our elected officials. Just this past 10 days ago, I sat down with our state delegation, and they will include a request for bond money to replace the Carroll County Elementary playground that was ripped out unexpectedly. So having a good relationship with those elected officials has really paid off. A deeper relationship with the business community. Again, as a business owner, I've been to many business meetings, but I've learned that our businesses want to help. They want to reach out and help. They want to sponsor our sporting teams. They want to offer extended learning opportunities, our tutoring companies. And I've learned that our parents feel disenfranchised. They feel very disenfranchised. They want to be heard. They want to be included. They don't want secrets held from them. But most of all, I've heard from our teachers. Our teachers want to focus on their craft and not teach all the stuff they see in surrounding counties in the state.
Okay. Tricia?
Again, it's not a new learning, but certainly always one that comes to heart for me, is the importance of listening and working collaboratively with others. Certainly can help us as we begin to move forward. And again, not something brand new just for this year, because again, our last 4 years, as we know, have certainly created some challenges or presented some challenges for us. So again, one of the things that I constantly have to remind myself of is the importance of focusing and really not being distracted. Again, we want to hear concerns. We certainly want to work through concerns, but we can't lose our focus on the mission of our Board of Ed. And our main mission is the teaching and learning that's happening in the classrooms. So again, the importance of focusing and not being distracted.
Okay, very good. Next question. We'll start with James.
All right. Politics has really divided our community and now our school system. What can you do as a board member to bring us together?
Thank you. I think I kind of touched on that in the last question. I believe we got to keep politics out of the classroom. And I think we got to keep politics off the board. I think we got to keep politics, again, I believe a lot of times with everything that happens in our society, it's truly a pendulum, and I'll go back to it. It swings one way really far. Think about the TSA. I go back, when everybody had to take their shoes off and basically derobe and check, and the pendulum swung really far, and people pushed back, and we found a middle ground, right? I think it's happening in the school system right now with politics. I think both sides are pushing hard to ensure we stay politically neutral, but at the same time, they want to make sure that they have maybe their side or their say. So I would just say go back to listening, involving the community, and ensuring that we stay neutral. I hope nobody brings up that we've been endorsed by the commissioners. I'm proud of it, or the delegation. They're all Republican. So when somebody says, well, you have endorsements from Republicans, that's Carroll County. There's not a Democratic elected official. So I'm proud to have their endorsements, but it doesn't mean we're making the board political.
Tom?
Right. I've said for years and years that the Board of Education is nonpartisan for a reason. There is absolutely no place for partisanship, for politics on the board. We are there to support our students, to support our educators, to listen to the parents, and to make sure our school system is a better learning environment for each student. Does it get divisive at times? Of course. We saw that in this past year or two, and that's one of the reasons that I decided to run for the board, because I really hated to see how the politics were tearing the community apart and our schools apart. There was so much going on that just didn't need to be there. And you know, for me personally, it's to listen to both sides, to all sides. It's not just the both sides. There's lots of sides. Everybody has their own view, and we need to be open to that. And it's not our job to put our views on anybody else. It's our job to listen to what's being said.
Steve?
Yeah, politics bringing us together. Wow, I really hope that does happen, because this whole race has just been, again, if you're following social media, it's just been really disheartening. But you know what? I was in the military for 20 years, and pretty simple. It's focus on the mission, and that's really what we need to do. We need to make sure that we have a climate of nonpartisanship in our classrooms at all times, from the top down. We really need to stamp out any kind of activism at every level. And we need, you know, when I was in the classroom, my colleagues and I, we would try to stop it. But you can't stop it all the time, because you have one or two that, you know, think they have a mission to do what they want to do. But we really need to make sure that we focus on neutrality, that we focus on academic achievement, that we focus on the well-being of the child, the student, and that's what we need to do to come together.
Tricia?
The board seat is certainly a nonpartisan seat. So again, we need to remain focused on teaching and learning and the academic achievement of our students. And if we ever forget what that focus is, we need to get in the schools and see all of the wonderful things that are happening there. And I think the bottom line is that if we're really, truly honest with ourselves, I think we would acknowledge that there's certainly more that unites us than divides us. So if we can get back as a community and acknowledge that, yes, you might feel one way about one issue and I might feel another way, but again, the bottom line is when it all boils down, there's certainly more that unites us than divides us. So I'd like to build on that as we continue to move forward.
Amanda?
So I think the question was about how would I work to bring folks together and so that they can work effectively. And it's what I do every day in the classroom. So just today, I had a 3-hour doctoral seminar, right? And we sat and we talked about differing opinions and ideas. We poked holes in each other's arguments. We tried to maybe take on different perspectives and then said, oh, maybe that's not for me, right? But it was respectful. It was in a safe space. It was in a place where we could have this dialogue and this conversation, and I'm able to facilitate that. That's one of the things I really enjoy doing as an educator. But I'm going to list also those key contributors to student success that I talked about at the beginning: parents, educators, students, community organizations and community members, local officials. If we can come together to collaborate in a respectful and productive way, if we can all develop this collective pride in achieving excellence, as you're talking about, and building community, I think that we can get a lot done. I'm prepared. I can roll up my sleeves. I can work with current board members and anyone that's elected along with me to create an environment of support, and that will lead to results.
Okay, next question. And we'll start with Tom.
All right, will you push the county commissioners to increase funding for schools by increasing the property tax rate or collecting impact fees? Why or why not?
Well, first of all, that would not be in our wheelhouse to be doing. That is not the responsibility of the Board of Education. The Board of Education is to oversee the school system. We have oversight over policy. That is up to the commissioners. I've spoken to quite a few commissioners, and they both, basically say, raising taxes is not part of the equation. There's also legal reasons why impact fees can't be assessed. I thought that, maybe impact fees would be a way to raise more funds, but they're not. So, what we need to do is, the school system, they work on their budget. The Board of Education actually doesn't create the budget. We approve the budget. and work with the Board of Commissioners, to really talk about where the funds are coming from, what we need. They have to know our needs very clearly.
Yeah, again, Board of Education has a specific swim lane to stay in, and that's our role. Our citizens elect commissioners for that purpose, to look at taxes, fees, and whatnot. And our county commissioners have a monumental task to make sure that they fund many departments within our county. But I will tell you now, I will rely on my business experience and my experience in the military to lay out and clearly articulate unfunded requirements. We have to lay out clearly what's not funded, how much we need and what we need it for. And we have to make a coherent, cogent argument with the commissioners to say we should be funded before, say, the police, or we should be funded first before, say, Public Works. But that is our job, and that's what we need to focus on. But I will work with state legislators to see if we can have somehow Annapolis and the majority party there change the ridiculous Kerwin formula and the ridiculous blueprint funding formula that's just not going to fund our needs.
Patricia.
Our job certainly is to stay in our own lane. So our job, as far as the Board of Education is concerned, is to make sure that we're sharing what the system needs are. So as we share our system needs and priorities, that's what we take before the commissioners. And I think one of the ways that we will hopefully continue to do that is to continue to have collaborative meetings throughout the year, so that it's not just at budget time that we're going before them saying, okay, now here's what we need and why we need it. But if we can have those sit-down sessions where we are sharing throughout the year what the system needs and priorities are, that will help them gain a better understanding. So when they begin their job of coming up with the budget and who's getting what, they hopefully will keep in mind what the education system needs. But again, we don't raise taxes, we share what our needs are.
Thank you. Yeah, I will absolutely advocate for every dollar possible with the commissioners, but as many have said, raising taxes or proposing that at all is not within the scope of the board. Listening to the community, identifying their priorities and needs, understanding how the needs of the school system articulates with what is available, that's what the Board of Education does. I agree that we need to make a compelling argument and for what we need and advocate for that. But we also need to develop really solid working relationships with commissioners so that we can think together about the process of planning, especially thinking more long-term, because a lot of times my understanding is that in the past, boards may have come to the commissioners and said, we have this immediate need right now, and it's just not possible to do because it wasn't planned for in advance. And also a lot of times we're dealing with putting out fires. So thinking more long-term, but then also setting aside some additional funds to make sure we can put out those fires would be useful.
James.
All right, so I only have a minute. 88% of our budget is currently spent on salaries, benefits, and everything involved with overhead in terms of man labor. So we have 12% to play with. There's not enough in 12% to get the money we need for Blueprint. The state's not going to give it to us. Everybody up here wants to fund Blueprint. Everybody up here wants to pay our teachers. Everybody wants to bring instructional aides. Everybody wants to find additional assistance. I'm going to ask a question. We're not revenue generating. Are we using a credit card? Are we going to go and take a loan? So the only option is to go to the commissioners. Now, in terms of taxes, that's not my decision, but I will say this. Revenue has increased in Carroll County over the years due to property taxes going up. With that, our percentage being funded to Carroll County has decreased. Someone tried to lecture me from the county on how I didn't understand finance and that the revenue went up, so we didn't need the same percentage because we didn't get the same. That's not how it works. Okay, figure out a percentage that we need to fund our system, whether it's Blueprint, teachers, and stick to it. As revenue goes up in the county, that doesn't mean my share comes down. My share doesn't come down. So I understand finance. They're not going to pull one over, so I'm going to work with my commissioners to ensure that we get what we deserve.
Okay, next question. We'll lead off with Steve.
All right, this question is, in many cases, students with 504 plans and IEPs who have accommodations or services have not had them met for the last few years. How would you hold CCPS accountable, and have the requirements met?
Well, that's a shocking statement because, again, these 504, and for those folks that don't know what a 504 is, 504 and an individualized education plan, these are legally mandated requirements and accommodations that we must provide students in our schools. So if they're not met, that's a problem because we are legally mandated to meet those. So if there are issues where we have widespread cases of our students not receiving the accommodations they need, then that's something that we need to address with the superintendent's staff, and we need to discern why that's not the case. But I will give a shout out to special educators, teachers, because I was one. Not a special educator, but I work with many. They have so many requirements levied upon them through statutory requirements, policies, and they do everything they can. But we need to make sure that if a parent has an issue, we address it, and we give them a quick means to remediate a solution.
Again, once items are noted in the 504s and IEPs, we don't have a choice. We have to meet whatever those accommodations or whatever those goals are that we have set for students. One way that we've done this is that, we have built in some extra opportunities to provide services for students. So things like that we'll have to continue to do until we get everyone pretty much caught up. And I would think at this point, I would have to go to the powers to be to see if that's accurate, that we haven't met, what's in place in the last few years, because I know our folks have certainly been working hard with building in opportunities for students to be caught up. So again, it's not an option by the time it's mandated or written down on the 504 or IEP. It's something that we have to provide.
So I'm actually not surprised to hear this. This is a problem throughout the country. And even though there is a mandate, it just simply can't be done. So it's not for lack of trying, right? OTs, PTs, speech therapists, some of them in our county work among 7 different schools. So they can see each child on their caseload maybe once a month. That's not enough, right? And others, got behind during the pandemic, or they have frequent absences or illnesses. They can't receive services that day. They then need to be made up according to the law, and there's simply not time in the day, right? So we need more support staff. We need to decrease the paperwork load. Even though it is mandated, there are others who can assist with that. We also still have to increase the training for behavioral response and things like that so that folks can actually get their jobs done and try to meet some of these mandates. And we need to help parents advocate with the school to make sure that the mandates are met.
James.
Thank you. So I agree with everything that's said. I'm kind of at the end of the line here. The only thing I'll add is, I think we just got to ensure that if there's any blatant intentional, something being done that doesn't meet the needs of the student that's required, that we ensure that it's addressed. I believe what Amanda's saying, and I agree with what she's saying, in that there's just sometimes not enough time in the day, or we can't get to every need, and we try our best and we do our best, and it's a federal mandate and we're trying. But I would only add that if there's anything that a parent has and it's brought forward to the administration, to the board, I don't like sweeping things under the rug. I don't like, trying to, gloss over misconduct. I think we have to ensure we handle it, and if there's a true need that's not being met blatantly or intentionally, that's the only thing I'll say that, maybe we need to address, obviously, immediately. Other than that, kind of everybody said it, it's a federal mandate and we have to follow it, and sometimes there may not be enough time in the day, but we do the best we can.
Tom.
Yes, so about half of my literacy students had IEPs or 504s, so I've sat through many, many IEP meetings. I've worked very, very closely with the special ed departments in my schools. So I see firsthand every day I was working, the challenges that they go through. And the special education teachers work very, very hard. And luckily they do have instructional assistants that are able to help out in the classroom. Plus the regular education teachers do get the IEPs and the 504. So, part of that responsibility is for the classroom teacher to make sure the IEP is being followed, because the special ed teacher cannot be in that classroom all the time. And that is, part of the problem. These educators are stretched very, very thin, and they have a large caseload. And the other part that I've mentioned before is the paperwork. They get overwhelmed with the paperwork. I know in other jurisdictions, they get help with the paperwork, so that would be a thing to look at.
Very good. Okay, next question then. This will be question number 10 of our randomly selected questions.
All right. During the pandemic, Carroll was first in reopening schools and restarting sports and unmasking students, only to be fought by the State Board of Education at every turn. Given this experience, do you favor greater local control over such matters?
Patricia, we'll start with you again.
Okay, the bottom line is local boards of ed should have the autonomy in providing for our educational system. And again, that's through the state constitution. You know, the state says that it's giving the requirement of education to the locals. So it really is a local responsibility. I think what had happened, and I think what we have to keep in mind is we were facing a worldwide pandemic. And as such, you know, it's hard to say, you know, what we could have, should have done. But again, when you're looking at the health of people, I think that became the paramount thing. And I think the state was really feeling like it was doing its part in saying, until it's safe, you know, we're going to continue to mask the students. But again, it came down to eventually giving us back our local control, which was what we needed.
I believe in a balance of local control and input from state and even federal guidelines, because I think a lot of times that those are informed by evidence and best practices. You know, the American Academy of Pediatrics promoted the fact that kids should be in school as much as possible, and I favor that as well. So I think if future situations arise where there might be the need to return to virtual learning temporarily or even mask children, we know a lot more now, right, about what works and what doesn't. We also know for whom that's not appropriate. I think we can use some of these lessons learned to increase access, to make sure that we're making smarter decisions. I think that a thoughtful board member will work really hard to balance all of these considerations, understanding that emergencies may crop up that we just need to address in real time, as you were saying. You know, board members care about students. They want to keep their mandate to keep safe and effective learning at top of mind.
James.
Okay, so I 100% favor more local control. I fought against this big time. The state shut us down. They took sports away from our kids. I called the commissioners 8 weeks straight, got sports open back up. North Carroll actually was the only one in the county at the time that played soccer because we said we need our kids to play sports. We realized what damage we were being done. The only reason we were able to get the mask off our children is because Carroll County decided to fight. The state put in a mandate because Carroll County was the only county that was going to go mask optional. The only county. So what did the state do? They said, we're going to use our control. We're going to come down on the Carroll County. We're going to use a emergency action plan, 180 days. We're going to take local control. I wanted to fight it then. Legally, probably wasn't a good fight. They did it a second time. Carroll County finally stood up and said, that's enough. We're going to fight. And people said, I'm for wasting dollars because you can't fight the state. Absolutely not. I'm going to fight for Carroll County. That's why I'm elected. So if the state oversteps their control, usurps local control, I'm going to fight it. And that's what I believe in, and I believe we need to get back to allowing elected officials to lead their counties.
Tom.
Yeah, previously it was mischaracterized that I opposed reopening schools. What I had said is that I thought we should be listening to the public health experts. You know, you're going back when the pandemic was new, nobody really knew what was to expect, how it was going to play out. I mean, having said that, you know, it was important that we got back in class. Nobody, I think, would argue with that. I think the idea of local control is a little bit misunderstood because, you know, legally there are certain things that a school system can't do against the state without losing funding. I mean, there is, you know, they have that power to take away funding if you ignore them. So you can't just ignore them. But you know, moving forward, I don't see us returning to any of these options. I think we've learned enough. I think we've moved on, and I think that's the important thing to look at.
Steve?
I think this question for voters this is a real clear difference from the two camps, the BMW camp and the PTA camp. There must be local control, and the local Board of Education must retain it. That's why we elect Board of Education members in our county. Everything we do, is it rooted in COMAR? Is it in law? And if it's not in law, we need to say, wait a minute, we're the duly elected officials in this county, and we're going to retain local control. The state overstepped their legal authority in prolonging masks, prolonging school closures, and our kids paid a huge price. And if there's one thing that the pandemic proved, is that parents do know better. Parents are pretty smart. They know what's best for their children. And, options are better. And if you look at the recent NAEP scores released for 4th and 8th grade, Florida did the best because they opened so much earlier. We need to retain local control.
Very good. Okay, I think given our timing, we have time for one more question, and then 1 minute each for individual closing comments.
Do you want to do?
One more question.
This is actually a repeat question.
Okay.
Would you agree? And it was on using bathrooms. So, all right. CCPS has 5 bargaining units, and each one is constantly in negotiations with the administration. Do you think it is appropriate for these organizations to endorse and financially support Board of Education candidates? And we start with Amanda.
Sure. So we also had this question earlier this week. Education organizations have long endorsed candidates for Board of Education. That's one of the things that they do as part of their process. And, certainly our local education association has endorsed candidates from all sides of the aisle, from all perspectives, and they do that based on who they think would best lead the schools. I am actually more concerned about candidates that claim that, having some sort of an affiliation with an education association would make us beholden to them, and then in the same breath kind of crows about the fact that they're endorsed by multiple commissioners with whom you would also have to bargain and collaborate. So I think that, there's some possible conflicts of interest on all sides, but people that are thoughtful, intelligent, and understand the role of a board member can do that effectively without being swayed.
James?
So that's me. I'm proud to be the only one up here that did not seek the CCA endorsement. I do think it's a conflict of interest. I mean, they're a bargaining group that's going to come and you're going to have to negotiate large contracts with. So I think it's a conflict of interest. I didn't think it was in the best interest of my campaign to seek that endorsement because I want to make sure I can hold true in that negotiation for the teachers, for the parents, for the students, for everybody involved. In terms of having the endorsement of incoming commissioners, everybody up here just said that's not their swim lane. So I don't know what the big deal is if it's not their swim lane to determine our funding and and whether or not taxes get raised to pay for education, then it doesn't sound like a conflict to me. And having somebody's endorsement, again, in Carroll County, it's obviously a great honor of mine, so I'm proud of it. But to go back to your question, their bargaining units, their bargaining agreements, the State Education Association is going to come down heavy on Carroll County with Blueprint and other things, and I just want to make sure that I'm not beholden to anybody that is going to try to take away local control, and I will never sell Carroll County out, and I'm going to do what's best for the students, parents, and teachers.
Tom?
Well, I was thrilled this morning when the Baltimore Sun endorsed Team PTA, but the only endorsement that I sought out was from the Carroll County Education Association. CCA is made up entirely of teachers, school counselors, and nurses. About 65% of our educators are members, and it's an honor to know that these professionals are supporting me. These are the people who are on the front lines day after day, working with all our students. Public education, we take everyone. We work with the absolute best students and the most challenging, and we give each student every opportunity to succeed and to grow, regardless of background. When people attack the teachers union, they really are attacking our dedicated educators who are doing their best, even in the most challenging of circumstances every single day. So I welcome the CCA endorsement. And you have to remember also that CCA is only one of the 5 bargaining units that get the most publicity. Another thing to clarify, the Board of Education does not actually actively negotiate with any of the bargaining units, including CCA. That is done internally. The Board of Ed approves the contracts.
Steve?
Yeah, I have no problem with bargaining units endorsing candidates. That's free speech. That's what made this country great. But it's really important that voters understand how campaigns are funded and to what extent. So I really encourage them to go to the Board of Elections, look at the campaign finance stuff. You know, the CCA and MSCA has dumped tens of thousands of dollars into our opponent's campaign. Tens of thousands, probably almost upwards to 100,000. They have funded signs, mailers, TV commercials, and that's fine. And so, you know, we will work to make sure that our team will make sure that we educate our values to voters. But, you know, we don't bargain with commissioners, we work with them. And so it's really important that, you know, we will work with them to make sure that we have a great relationship. And so, yeah, I have no problem with them being endorsed by bargaining units.
Tricia?
This is an education system, and certainly when we talk about education, we're talking about the teachers and the OTs, the PTs, the counselors, and those who are really tasked with providing education and learning to our students. So I'm really honored to be endorsed by our teachers union. I can say that I'm doubly honored because, again, I'm a former teacher within our school system. And, you know, I have looked forward to being endorsed by them, and I'm grateful that I have been. I don't see it as a conflict of interest. Again, I think over the years, as has been said, they've, as a group, certainly vetted all candidates who are interested in being vetted for their endorsement. And again, what you have to go through as far as the questions and the responses, again, I think they do a nice job of trying to see which ones to back. Board members do not negotiate directly with them as a group. We only set the parameters.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the question and answer portion of our program this evening. We'd like to allow each candidate now 1 minute in order to have a personal closing statement. James, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I want to thank the 6 candidates. Well, I guess Tyra's missing, but for good reason. So thank her as well. This has been a long journey. I'm going to spend my 1 minute thanking my family, my beautiful wife, my 3 daughters. Those who have run a campaign, they know up here it's time away from your family. So I'm going to take my last closing statement to thank, again, my wife, my daughters, my family for the support. It's not easy. I hope that Carroll County citizens got to see, you know, throughout this process who I am as a person. I think I speak from my heart and speak true, and I don't shy away from a debate, and I hold to my values. We might not always agree, but I feel that at least at a minimum, I'm going to make sure that, you know, I stick to what I believe in. Again, thank everybody. The election has started, so those of you who haven't voted, I ask for your vote. Those of you who have voted, I hope you voted for me. But thank you. But lastly, since my last word in forum, thank you, my beautiful wife, Katie, and my 3 children.
Tom.
Tonight has been an excellent forum, and thank you to everyone who organized it and those who are watching. This is probably the most important Board of Ed race in memory. 3 of us up here are lifelong career educators, but that doesn't mean we have the same backgrounds or visions for the future. Dr. Dorsey's career was in elementary schools as a teacher and administrator. Dr. Jaskowski is a college professor with an expertise with special needs students. I was a high school classroom teacher working with all academic levels. That breadth of experience is exactly what this school board needs. For me, focusing on academic excellence for each student is my top priority. I've been there, I know what that means. And part of that process is knowing that not every student gets there the same way. One size does not fit all in education. That's why we need excellent educators who are professionals who know what they are doing. And we need our parents involved and engaged. So I ask for your vote and make sure that these things become reality. Thank you.
Steve.
Yeah, again, as I said earlier, I'm a parent, a retired military officer, a former executive, and even an educator, still certified. But most of all, I'm a taxpayer. And voters shouldn't have to wonder what their elected officials' values are from day to day. I have been consistent, transparent, and open about my values and what I'd like to see for our county school system since day one. I think I have the diverse set of skills needed to make sure that we adequately manage the county's largest employer, that we make sure that every student is safe, educated, in an environment that focuses on academics. I'm so proud to be endorsed by our state delegation, most of our incoming county commissioners, our sheriff, and those relationships that I have will help our students succeed. My skill sets related to business and my investment and involvement with the business community will bring a lot of dividends to our students. But again, I would really appreciate your vote, and I look forward to serving.
Patricia.
Many thanks again to our moderator, Skip Boyles, the Finksburg Planning and Citizens Council, Inc., the Carroll Media Center, and to our audience for attending tonight's forum. And I'm thankful also to those citizens who are watching at home to become informed. I've always said that it's because of the students, the staff, the parents, and the communities that we have in Carroll County working together that we can all claim Carroll County Public Schools as an outstanding school system. I certainly remain committed to the values, the beliefs, and the shaping of our strategic plan as we move forward. I will continue to use my knowledge, skills, and abilities as I pursue this second term on the Board of Education. The education, as I've said before, of our students is our major mission of the Board of Education as we fulfill the governance role that we have. So moving forward, I do ask that you would please support me in my run for my second term, and your support will be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Amanda.
I began tonight by talking about why I'm running for school board. If some of my opponents don't want to see any changes made, they're satisfied with the status quo, and that's clearly not serving all of our students and community. I've heard from so many who are eager to see some change within the school system. This doesn't mean completely rewriting history or culture of our county, but it does mean being open to new ways of thinking and doing things. The fact that some of my opponents have clearly stated that they don't want our county to look like some of our neighboring counties implies that they do not want to see more diversity and that they're fearful of what that diversity might bring. In my mind, it can only bring a more welcoming, community-minded school system that represents the needs and interests of every child and family. I ask tonight for your vote because I know that along with Mr. Scanlon and Dr. Dorsey, I can unite us with our shared values and I can help bring about this vision for a stronger CCPS.
Okay, then that concludes our program for tonight. I'd like to first thank our candidates for joining us in this interesting debate and conversation of a vitally important program for the county. So thank you very much, each and every one of you, for attending tonight. I'd like to thank the Media Center, Carroll Media Center, for hosting this venue and providing all of the ancillary support that they provided for this program this evening. I'd like to thank the audience, both here and in person, as well as virtually, and also Heather for her assistance in reading the randomly selected questions. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening and good night.